President Trump says cutting tariffs on China to 80% seems right. The remarks come ahead of crucial trade talks with Beijing tomorrow in Switzerland. As budget work is underway in Congress, President Trump is asking Republicans to raise taxes on millionaires to help avoid cuts to social safety net programs like Medicaid. President Trump is seeking a 30-day unconditional ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. Trump's warning regarding consequences if the truce is violated. Deadly crossfire in Kashmir, at least 5 civilians killed as India and Pakistan trade heavy shelling overnight.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Today's Friday, May 9th. I'm Stephanie Cox. Retired Supreme Court Justice David Souter has died. He made it to the High Court in 1990 after being nominated by then-President George H.W. Bush. Souter served for nearly 2 decades before retiring in 2009. In a statement this morning, Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts said Souter, quote, brought uncommon wisdom and kindness to a lifetime of public service. Souter was 85 years old. Newly installed Pope Leo gave his first Mass as pontiff today. The intimate service in the Vatican Sistine Chapel was attended by his former fellow cardinals who elected him the new leader of the Catholic Church. Pope Leo's formal inauguration Mass will take place in St. Peter's Square on Sunday, May 18th, and he will hold his first general audience on May 21st. U.S. leaders yesterday celebrated an American pope getting elected for the first time. President Trump congratulated the new pontiff, saying he looks forward to meeting him. Vice President J.D. Vance also congratulated Leo on social media, and former President Biden wished the new pope well. Meanwhile, Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson said he was proud that the new pope was born in his city. And Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi praised the cardinals who elected Leo, calling it one of the most diverse conclaves ever. Cardinal Robert Prevost, now Pope Leo XIV, is the world's first pope born in the United States, as you've just heard. But before he walked onto the Vatican balcony Thursday, he was a relatively unknown person on the world stage. So who is he and what kind of papacy will he lead?
Prevost was born in 1955, originally from Chicago. However, he spent decades in Peru and has dual nationalities. He first went as a missionary and later served as bishop of the Diocese of Chiclayo from 2015 to 2023. A close friend says he was a firm supporter of late Pope Francis, especially on social justice issues. So what kind of leader will Pope Leo XIV be? His debut at St. Peter's Basilica offers some clues. The first is his choice of name. The last pope to take the name Leo was Leo XIII in the late 1800s. And he focused much of his papacy advocating for workers' rights and fair pay conditions. The second is his choice of language.
La pace sia con tutti voi.
None of Pope Leo's speech was in English, but rather in Italian, the language of the papacy, and briefly in Spanish to greet his Peruvian community. His first words in public put a clear emphasis on the need for peace, something Francis also often focused on.
We want to be a synodal church, a church that walks, a church that always looks for peace, always looks for charity, always looks to be close, especially to those who suffer.
President Donald Trump was among the world leaders who congratulated Pope Leo.
What greater honor could there be?
But the first U.S. Pope has a history of criticizing the Trump administration's policies. In February, his account on X reposted an article with the following headline, J.D. Vance is wrong, Jesus doesn't ask us to rank our love for others. White House officials didn't comment on Prevost's critiques. Pope Leo is expected to follow in the footsteps of Francis, who met with Vance at the Vatican the day before he died.
Big tax and spending questions are at the forefront of Republicans' new budget goals. President Trump wants to prevent cutting social safety net programs like Medicaid and is reportedly pushing for a higher millionaire tax to get it done. NTD's Melina Weiskup reports.
President Trump aims to make the biggest tax cut for middle and working class Americans and eliminate taxes on tips, overtime, and senior Social Security. Now he's asking Congress to look at raising rates on wealthier Americans. Under consideration is a proposal to raise the individual tax rate on people earning over $2 million per year from 37% to 39%. A White House source told the Epoch Times' Amel Akin that the plan is to help Trump meet his goal to lower taxes on the working class, at the same time protecting Medicaid funds. But the road ahead is sticky, as some Republicans in Congress are opposed to such an increase.
I'd like to not see rates raised on anybody at this point. This is very difficult to be able to do right now across the economy in that sense. So I'd like to be able to maintain rates where they are, but the vast majority have got to be able to get engaged and say, how do we actually resolve this?
House Speaker Mike Johnson previously said he's not a fan of it, but to stay tuned, highlighting the fluidity of the discussions underway. The news comes as lawmakers are having trouble navigating a plan to cut the federal budget and cut taxes without causing a big blow to social safety net programs. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
Trump today cautioned fellow Republicans in Congress of the political consequences if they raise taxes on the wealthiest Americans. He wrote on Truth Social that Republicans should probably not do it, but added that he would be okay if they do. President Trump calling for a 30-day unconditional ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. All previous agreements between the two countries have failed so far. Trump warns of further sanctions if the truce is not respected. The president said this ceasefire must ultimately build toward a peace agreement. It can also all be done very quickly. He went on to add that if the ceasefire is not respected, the U.S. and its partners will impose further sanctions. Russia and Ukraine already agreed to a 30-day truce on energy infrastructure back in mid-March, but both sides later accused each other of violating that agreement countless times. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky now says that Kyiv is ready to implement a complete 30-day ceasefire immediately. Zelensky added that such a truce would be a real indicator that Russia actually wants to move toward peace. Taiwan criticized Russia and China for distorting World War II history, saying Chinese communist forces made no substantial contribution to fighting Japan and instead took the opportunity to expand their own forces.
Peace is priceless and war has no winners. World War II was undoubtedly the deadliest war in human history, and the pain that it caused has echoed even to the present day. Taiwan and Europe are now facing the threat of a new authoritarian bloc. We are seeing our decades-old undersea cables, crucial for communications and cybersecurity, being sabotaged. We are seeing external interference in our elections, crucial for healthy democratic development, through the spread of misinformation and disinformation, sowing intentional division in society. We are seeing our fair, free, and open international rules-based markets being tested by all manner of gray zone activities, dumping, pressures, and intrusions.
Russian President Putin told Chinese leader Xi that World War II was won under the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party. Taiwan disputed that characterization and said it was the Republic of China government, inherited by Taiwan, that was the winner in the Allied war effort against Japan and Germany. Taiwan's Mainland Affairs Council put out a statement saying, quote, "The Chinese communists only took the opportunity to expand and consolidate communist forces and made no substantial contribution to the war of resistance, let alone leading the war of resistance." Taiwan has sought to cast the war as a lesson to the Chinese regime on why its aggression will end in failure. At least 5 civilians are dead after Indian and Pakistani soldiers engaged heavy volleys of shells and gunfire overnight. The growing military standoff erupted following an attack on tourists in the India-controlled part of Kashmir late last month. Residents in several parts of India-administered Kashmir today inspected the damage. They said heavy shelling damaged vehicles, burned down homes, and destroyed shops. The aftermath of the attacks on the town of Uri in India-administered Kashmir can be seen here. Police say a woman was killed and 2 other civilians were injured in the area, bringing civilian deaths in India to 17 since Wednesday. In Pakistan, an unusually intense night of artillery exchanges left at least 4 civilians dead and wounded 12 others. The deaths occurred in the areas where the line of control that divides Kashmir. And an update on the Gaza humanitarian crisis. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee said today that neither Israel nor Hamas will be involved in aid distribution.
I want to say the Israelis are going to be involved in providing necessary military security because it is a war zone. but they will not be involved in the distribution of the food or even in the bringing of the food into Gaza. Their role will remain on the perimeter as is necessary to make sure that those who are bringing the food in and who are distributing the food are kept safe and out of harm's way in the midst of a war zone.
Israel cut most aid supplies into Gaza after the Hamas terror attacks in 2023 that began the war. It let aid in during a ceasefire that began in January this year, but cut off supplies again when it resumed its offensive against the terrorist group in March. Israel has accused agencies, including the United Nations, of allowing large amounts of aid to fall into the hands of Hamas. Mediation efforts by the United States, Qatar, and Egypt have not been successful in implementing another phase of the ceasefire. And the Trump administration has imposed sanctions on a third Chinese oil refinery and 3 port operators for purchasing Iranian oil. The move was part of the maximum pressure strategy by the Trump administration to cut off Iran's oil income. It aims to push Tehran into limiting its nuclear program and to end its support for terrorist groups in the Middle East. The Treasury Department said the sanctioned Chinese companies had purchased or facilitated the delivery of hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Iranian oil. This as the U.S. and Iran are expected to head into a 4th round of nuclear talks. President Trump signals that he could cut China tariffs ahead of the weekend's trade talks with Beijing. Trump said today on Truth Social that 80% tariffs on Chinese goods, quote, seems right. He added, quote, China should open up its market to USA would be so good for them. Closed markets don't work anymore. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Chief Trade Negotiator Jameson Greer will meet Chinese economic czar He Lifeng in Switzerland. The weekend talks in Geneva have been described by administration officials as a step toward de-escalating tensions with China. Joining us to discuss the upcoming trade negotiations between the U.S. and China is Spencer Morrison, the author of Reshore, How Tariffs Will Be Bringing Our Jobs Home and Revive the American Dream. Good to have you with us. Let's get straight into it. We heard it just now. Trump says he's open to reducing tariffs on China to 80%. After weeks of high trade tensions with China and with the U.S.-UK deal now in the bag, how do you expect these talks and this deal to go?
I would be surprised if the talks are productive, and the reason for that is that China has a large portion of its economy tied specifically to exporting to America and to Europe and to the rest of the world. China's economy is highly bifurcated. Many of their industrial sectors service their domestic market, but they have a large portion that only does exports. So any amount of tariffs or trade barriers hurts China disproportionately than it would just about any other country on earth. So I think China is going to have a firm stance on this. They really need access to America's market in order to keep the fomenting of unrest at home sort of at a minimum. China is all about full employment, and tariffs are going to hurt employment in China. No doubt about it.
And China is going through economic turmoil, which is also being, enhanced by these latest tariffs. It has put on 125% retaliatory tariffs and imposed a wide range of non-tariff barriers. Do you expect all of that retaliation mixed with the economic pressure at home to lead to further retaliation from China if the trade talks indeed do not produce something?
Yeah, I think it's likely. I mean, China needs to get results, and the only result that China ultimately needs is to keep those markets open. So if that doesn't happen, there's going to be significant retaliation on China's front. Now, I think it's really important. President Trump has to hold the line on these tariffs on China. The fact of the matter is that American producers are being outcompeted on price and because of crooked trading practices in China. And since China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001, America's lost over 5 million manufacturing jobs, 60,000 factories have closed, and a whole bunch of America's core industries, like the production of computer chips, even steel, ball bearings, machine tools, all of this has moved over to China. So it's really important that America holds a firm line on tariffs because those industries need to be reshored back to America where they belong.
And it does look like jobs are being reshored to China already. Do you think that will continue, or potentially companies could send their jobs to low tariff countries?
Yeah, I think we've seen a bit of that already. I mean, there's been a big tariff differential between China and then other low-cost producers like India. Currently, the tariffs on China are 145%. On India, they're 10%. So Apple, for example, has announced they're going to move their production from China to India. And a lot of other companies are beginning to follow suit. But that's not the point of the tariffs, is it? The point of the tariffs is to move those factories back from China or India or Mexico, wherever they are, and move them back to America. So in my view, the tariffs need to go up, not down, not just on China, but on the rest of the developing world as well.
And what are some of the national security implications of continuing to rely on China for critical goods, and how do tariffs specifically target that?
Well, a really good example of this is your silicon chips that are in, the basis for computing. There's computers in everything nowadays. They're in our cars. They're obviously in our computers. They're even in things like toasters and washing machines. The reality is that the entire modern world runs on computer chips. And America is buying most of those computer chips from Taiwan and from China, which is a huge national security problem. If a conflict were to break out, not necessarily between America and China, but anything that disrupted those supply chains, America is entirely vulnerable. And it's actually worse than that, because America doesn't even manufacture the machinery required to print those chips. In fact, the photolithography machines that make all the chips, well, they come from the Netherlands. And then they go to Taiwan, they print the chips, and then America buys the chips. That entire supply chain has been offshored. And it's a critical national security crisis. So we have to get the factories back here, not just for the chips, but also for the machinery that makes the chips.
And with that in mind, how do you respond to concerns that tariffs on Chinese imports could lead to higher prices for Americans?
Well, I think in the short term, there's going to be some economic dislocation. Nobody denies that. But the question is the short-term pain worth the long-term gain? And I don't think anybody can look at this situation and honestly say that it makes sense for America to export its critical production to different countries all over the world. And ourselves not be able to manufacture enough automobiles or computers or aircraft parts, engine parts, ball bearings, machine tools. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, America's industries are hollowed out, and this is obviously a national security crisis, and it's obviously an economic crisis, because ultimately, if the economy isn't making anything, we're going to miss out on all of the benefits of any breakthrough technologies that are going to make industries more efficient. Why? Because we don't even have the industries here. So this is a crisis, an existential crisis for America, not just economically, but politically.
And on another front, the Chinese Communist Party is known for its human rights abuses. How should U.S. trade policy, including tariffs, address concerns about human rights abuses in China, such as forced labor in supply chains? And what role can tariffs play in that?
Well, the best way to deal with that issue is to just simply not export our factories to China. If Americans are standing against child labor and slave labor, which I think by and large we are, then we shouldn't be doing business in countries that use child labor and slave labor. Bring the factories back home. I mean, heck, even bringing them to Europe would be a lot better than having them in China. The reality is that there's just no good reason to trade with China at this stage.
Just in our last 30 seconds, do you think the US-UK fresh new trade deal will impact these upcoming talks in any way?
It's possible. I mean, ultimately, the UK-US deal is pretty tame. It doesn't change the status quo all that much. I think it's mildly beneficial to America, so I'm not opposed to it. But I would not expect anything like that to be given to China. And if it is, it's a huge, huge mistake. We can't play softball with China.
All right. Words of wisdom there. Thank you so much. Spencer Morrison, good to speak with you.
Thanks a lot. God bless.
And President Trump's administration is urging the Supreme Court to allow it to end an immigration program. It lets hundreds of thousands of immigrants from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela to temporarily live and work in the U.S. The emergency appeal yesterday is the latest that seeks to roll back lower court orders blocking Trump's immigration agenda. In its appeal, the Justice Department described its decision to revoke parole as, quote, one of the administration's most consequential immigration policy decisions. Starting in 2022, the Biden administration allowed immigrants from Venezuela to submit a 2-year parole request if they passed certain background checks and had a financial sponsor. That was later expanded to Haitians, Cubans, and Nicaraguan nationals. The Librarian of Congress is now out of a job. President Trump abruptly fired Carla Hayden yesterday, according to an email obtained by the Associated Press. The email came from the White House's Presidential Personnel Office. It read, quote, "On behalf of President Donald J. Trump, I am writing to inform you that your position as the Librarian of Congress is terminated effective immediately. Thank you for your service," unquote. A spokesperson for the Library of Congress confirmed that the White House told Hayden she was dismissed. Her 10-year term was set to expire next year. She had come under backlash from a conservative advocacy group, American Accountability Foundation. The group accused her and other library leaders of promoting children's books with radical content and literary material authored by Trump opponents. The Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, has canceled about 500,000 credit cards used by federal agencies. The department confirmed the move on Wednesday. In a post on X, DOGE said its program to find unused or unneeded credit cards was expanded to 32 agencies, and more than 500,000 cards have been deactivated. The post said there's still more work to do. The comment was posted alongside a spreadsheet showing which cards were canceled. It includes those used by the Treasury Department, Interior Department, Education Department, Defense Department, State Department, and many others. The Pentagon will immediately begin moving as many as 1,000 openly transgender service members out of the military. Others will be given 30 days to self-identify. The new directive was issued yesterday. The Supreme Court ruled on Tuesday that the Trump administration could enforce a ban on transgender individuals in the military while other legal challenges proceed. The Defense Department will begin going through medical records to identify others who haven't come forward. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said that a false gender identity divergent from an individual's sex cannot satisfy the rigorous standards necessary for military service.
So, in accordance with policy now reinstated, service members who have a current diagnosis or history of or exhibit symptoms consistent with gender dysphoria may elect to separate voluntarily. There's a timeline here, and then eventually involuntarily if necessary. This is the president's agenda. This is what the American people voted for, and we're going to continue to relentlessly pursue it.
Officials have said that as of December last year, there were over 4,200 troops diagnosed with gender dysphoria in the active duty, National Guard, and Reserve. But they acknowledge the number may be higher. There are about a total of 2.1 million troops serving in total. Lawmakers call for a Chinese robotics company to be blacklisted, citing national security concerns. Democrats and Republicans sent a letter to Pentagon officials this week asking them to designate the company Unitree as a Chinese military company. Unitree makes humanoid robots and robot dogs. Some of its products are currently used in American law enforcement and army operations, but the gear can be used for surveillance. The most concerning, lawmakers say, is remote digital access. Each robot is connected through the cloud with data going back to the Chinese regime. Chairman of the Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party said, quote, "Every single member of the committee, Democrats and Republicans, signed this letter because we all see the risk. Beijing is quietly embedding itself in our critical systems." Continuing with the quote, he said, "We must act now to ban and blacklist Unitree before it's too late." The United States' new ambassador to Panama, Kevin Cabrera, pledged yesterday to strengthen ties with the Central American country. Cabrera also raised China as a shared security concern regarding the Panama Canal.
The United States has committed to strengthening our relationship. First among my priorities will be to strengthen our joint work to counter harmful influences in the region, such as that of China. This includes protecting the canal from influences that affect our mutual interests.
Cabrera added that the U.S. and Panama would collaborate on issues including drug trafficking and boosting security at the Panama Canal. China's embassy in Panama rejected the U.S. ambassador's remarks and cited Panama's president, who denied any Chinese interference in the canal. China's presence in Panama has been a point of criticism from President Trump, who has said his administration would take back the Panama Canal from Chinese influence. Now to New York. In New York City, where a local advocacy group reports receiving bomb threats almost every day for over a week. The group says a man then smashed up one of its booths last week. The Global Service Center for Quitting the Chinese Communist Party is a nonprofit based in New York. It aids Chinese people in withdrawing from the Chinese Communist Party and its youth groups. It has recorded more than 446 million withdrawals to date. It was formed following the Epoch Times' 2004 editorial series, 9 Commentaries on the Chinese Communist Party. The organization was the recipient of recent threats aimed at the Falun Gong community in the Flushing neighborhood of Queens. On April 20th, the Service Center received a message threatening a mass shooting of anyone wearing clothing with Falun Gong on April 25th. The center said in a statement, the CCP's acts of terror threaten the lives and property of the American people, threaten the security and stability of American communities, and undermine America's foundation of religious freedom. It called on the United States to designate the Chinese Communist Party as a terrorist organization and a terrorist party. Stay with us. We'll be broadcasting the White House press briefing right after this break.
What's happened to this world we're living in? Why?
For the 4 years he has been on this earth, he has known nothing but war.
Wherever I go, the things I see, I just want to turn away. The dreams I have, the stories I could tell, will they still be possible? This year, more than ever, I need a brand new world, a clean world. Where I can improve myself and be inspired. My stage can be anywhere and everywhere. But it begins here.
Ganjing World, a brighter way of life.
Welcome to NTD News Today. Here are today's top stories. Retired Supreme Court Justice David Souter has died. He was 85 years old. President Trump says cutting tariffs on China to 80% seems right. The remark comes ahead of crucial trade talks with Beijing tomorrow in Switzerland. As budget work is underway in Congress, President Trump is asking Republicans to raise taxes on millionaires to help avoid cuts to social safety net programs like Medicaid. New UK sanctions on Russia. The British government is sanctioning oil tankers that are accused of aiding Putin's war effort. The UK said the fleet has damaged critical infrastructure, including an undersea cable in the Baltic Sea.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Today is Friday, May 9th. I'm Stephanie Cox. Retired Supreme Court Justice David Souter has died. He made it to the High Court in 1990 after being nominated by then-President George H.W. Bush. Souter served for nearly 2 decades before retiring in 2009. In a statement this morning, the Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts said Souter, quote, brought uncommon wisdom and kindness to a lifetime of public service. Souter was 85 years old. And President Trump signals that he could cut China tariffs ahead of the weekend trade talks with Beijing. Trump said today on Truth Social that 80% tariffs on Chinese goods, quote, seems right. He added, quote, China should open up its market to the USA. That would be so good for them. Closed markets don't work anymore, unquote. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Chief Trade Negotiator Jameson Greer will meet Chinese economic czar He Lifeng in Switzerland. The weekend talks in Geneva have been described by administration officials as a step toward de-escalating tensions with China. The White House National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett said there are about 24 trade deals being worked out right now. Take a listen.
There are about 24 right now, and the question of what the priority is, I think, is up to the president. And I think that Howard Lutnick and Jameson Greer have suggested that they might be moving towards getting a good deal in Asia. And there are a number of candidates for that. There are so many deals that are close, and some are easier than others. I think the deal with India was especially complex, but it looks like it's getting close to the finish line.
European Commissioner President Ursula von der Leyen said today she would only go to the White House for a solution on trade tariffs. The EU leader was reacting to a question related to President Trump calling her a fantastic person.
I had good conversations with President Trump on the phone and at the funeral of the Pope. But for me, it's important that if I go to the White House, I want to have a package we can discuss. So it has to be concrete, and I want to have a solution that we both can agree on. That is the work we're doing right now.
Von der Leyen was speaking at a joint press conference in Brussels with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. Merz says he congratulated President Trump on reaching a trade agreement with the United Kingdom, but warned that similar deals with individual European nations won't be possible. He emphasized that EU member states have fully delegated trade policy to the European Union, meaning any future deal must be negotiated with Brussels, not individual countries. Merz also raised concern about rising national debt across the globe, including in the United States, calling the trend troubling. And the owner of British Airways has ordered 32 Boeing planes. It comes the day after the UK and the United States announced a trade deal. Britain's international airline group said in an earnings statement that it also ordered 21 Airbus aircraft, and that the planes from both manufacturers are due for delivery between 2028 and 2033. U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said yesterday a massive deal between a UK airline and Boeing would soon be announced. He declined to say which airline would buy the planes, but said it would be a $10 billion order. At least 5 civilians are dead after Indian and Pakistani soldiers exchanged heavy volleys of shells and gunfire overnight. The growing military standoff erupted following an attack on tourists in the India-controlled part of Kashmir late last month. Residents in several parts of India-administered Kashmir today inspected the damage. They said heavy shelling damaged vehicles, burned down homes, and destroyed shops. The aftermath of the attacks on the town of Uri in India-administered Kashmir can be seen here. Police say a woman was killed and 2 other civilians were injured in the area, bringing civilian deaths in India to 17 since Wednesday. In Pakistan, an unusually intense night of artillery exchanges left at least 4 civilians dead and wounded 12 others. The deaths occurred in areas near the line of control that divides Kashmir. Joining us now to discuss India-Pakistan tensions is retired Colonel Darren Gaub, a geopolitical strategist, former battalion commander, and a Black Hawk helicopter pilot. Good to have you with us this morning, Darren. How do you interpret the current alliances with India aligning more closely with the U.S. and Pakistan with China?
Frankly, Steph, it's not a surprise. And this is a growing alliance again between the U.S. and India that has been, I think it's been really a pleasure to watch. I've hung out with many of the people who've moved here from India because they're very good, really, at capitalism and opening businesses and forming communities. And I'm glad to see that. having lived basically next to Pakistan for 4 years in Afghanistan for that period of time, I learned quite a bit about Pakistan and who to trust, who not to trust. And frankly, between the two nations, I'm not surprised that Pakistan would align more with China necessarily than the U.S. They're, I guess, far more similar. So we'll see where this goes. But this has been a conflict that's been at a low boil for a couple decades or more, and every once in a while it's going to flare up. Hopefully, they can have this come to a quick conclusion and get back to peace.
Right. Major powers seem to be standing back, perhaps citing the fact that it is an ongoing conflict. But VP Vance on Thursday saying the U.S. shouldn't get involved in this conflict. Considering, though, that there are nuclear capabilities involved with both parties, how do you see that stance? Is that reasonable?
I think it's reasonable for us not to get involved. That doesn't mean we don't necessarily make phone calls and talk to our allies and try to encourage them to end this quickly before it does grow bigger. So I don't mean complete disengagement. I don't think the Vice President means that either. What it does mean, though, is that there's no reason for us militarily to get involved and try to separate the parties. That's just never going to work. It's not our fight. Hopefully it goes back to that low boil and even better than that over time. But this is, again, not our fight, not our war to get involved in right now. And we should just be making phone calls.
Right. And the U.S. is actually selling arms to India. And at the same time, China is selling arms to Pakistan. Does that reshape the balance of power at all in this particular conflict?
I don't think that it will ultimately, because it's going to really come down to who's better trained. And I guess we'll see how that plays out pretty soon. But in some ways, this reminds me of what happened during the Spanish Civil War prior to World War II. Nations each arm both sides of a conflict, and then they keep doing that. And in some ways, it's an experimental testing ground for their military capabilities to see how much their equipment works. On the other side of it, of course, is the fact that, yes, we are the U.S. are selling our stuff to India, displaying that they are an ally through arms sales, and China is doing the same thing with Pakistan. So militarily, though, India definitely has the edge over Pakistan in population and military capability.
And why is China forging that alliance with Pakistan?
Well, China has always been working through Central Asia to really control a lot of access, routes, both air and ground, strategic mineral deposits. It's one of the reasons why they've been in Afghanistan since I saw them there in 2005 was to establish mining rights, and this is just an extension of that. Pakistan is in greater need, I guess, of economic ties than India is. And we've been working with India for long enough now that we've pulled them away from that alliance they really held with China a while back. So I think that's where they're going. This is just China continuing to build a version of the Belt and Road Initiative through Central Asia, and Pakistan's part of it.
And is that also what is related to the U.S.'s forging that alliance with India? Does that connect with its dynamic with China?
Yeah, we certainly want to have a strategic competitor right next door to China that doesn't hurt us. But in the end, India is a good trade partner, and like I said, we've had many people over here in the United States who come from India, and to see the communities and the businesses and the mindset they bring to the United States has been really impressive. And I think between the two nations, as we grow tighter and tighter together economically, both sides will benefit because India has a huge market to purchase material and goods from people, and that could be us supplying it.
Like you said, hopefully this tension in Kashmir just simmers down and passes by, and we don't see any more trouble there. Thank you so much for your time today, Darren Gobb. Good to speak with you.
Thanks, Steph.
And next, the British government is sanctioning up to 100 oil tankers that are part of Russia's so-called shadow fleet. Tankers defying penalties and aiding Russia's war efforts. Britain's Prime Minister said the UK will do everything to destroy this fleet. NTD's international correspondent Malcolm Hudson has more for us.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer joined a military summit in Norway, known as the Joint Expeditionary Force. It is a British-led military alliance of 10 northern European nations. Ministers discussed regional challenges, including the war in Ukraine.
So our focus is on Ukraine with our European allies. Of course, today we also announced our biggest ever sanctions package against the Russian shadow fleet. Really important work, again, discussed with our allies this afternoon.
The package of sanctions targeted around 100 oil tankers from Russia's so-called shadow fleet. To defy previous sanctions on Russia, Moscow built up the fleet of tankers whose ownership can be obscured. Britain has accused the operation of bankrolling Russia through the war. They are estimated to have carried more than $24 billion worth of cargo since the start of 2024. The British government said the shadow fleet has damaged critical infrastructure through what is referred to as reckless seafaring, referring to reported damage to an undersea cable in the Baltic Sea. Starmer said the UK will do everything in its power to destroy President Vladimir Putin's shadow fleet. British Foreign Secretary David Lammy called on Putin to accept President Trump's ceasefire deal and begin a process of accountability.
When this war is over, those who have perpetrated it in Russia must account for their crimes of aggression and their crimes against humanity.
Britain's Royal Navy said on Friday it monitored a Russian submarine in the English Channel as part of a NATO mission. They said the submarine, called Krasnodar, entered the channel close to the French coast and was on its way back to Russia from the eastern Mediterranean. Britain's Navy routinely conducts shadowing missions to monitor any potential threats to national security, including to critical infrastructure such as undersea cables or pipelines. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt is now addressing the media. Let's tune into the press briefing.
Focused on strengthening ties between our nations. 8 years ago, President Trump's first trip was to this same region of the world, where he introduced his bold peace through strength foreign policy strategy. On that trip, the president laid out his goal of eradicating terrorism and extremism in the region, which he successfully accomplished over the course of his administration with the total defeat of ISIS and the historic signing of the Abraham Accords. Now, 8 years later, President Trump will return to re-emphasize his continued vision for a proud, prosperous, and successful Middle East, where the United States and Middle Eastern nations are in cooperative relationships, and where extremism is defeated in place of commerce and cultural exchanges. This trip ultimately highlights how we stand on the brink of the golden age for both America and the Middle East, united by a shared vision of stability, opportunity, and mutual respect. The president greatly looks forward to visiting with our brave men and women in uniform at our U.S. Air Base in Qatar throughout this trip. Yesterday, President Trump demonstrated the art of the deal and secured a historic trade agreement, despite all of the naysayers who said no deals were coming. That, of course, turned out to be untrue. On the 80th anniversary of Victory Day for World War II, President Trump announced a great deal that provides American companies unprecedented access to the UK markets while bolstering U.S. national security. This trade deal will massively expand U.S. market access in the United Kingdom, creating a $5 billion opportunity for new exports for U.S. farmers, ranchers, and producers. This includes more than $700 billion in ethanol exports and $250 million in other agricultural products like good old American beef. The deal commits the United States and United Kingdom to work together to enhance industrial and agricultural market access and strengthens American competitiveness. Importantly, the deal also ensures streamlined customs procedures for U.S. exports. The UK will also be purchasing $10 billion of American-made Boeing planes as part of the deal. A trade agreement like this between the United States and the United Kingdom was being worked on for many years, but continued to prove elusive. But because of President Trump's bold negotiating approach, he got it done. All of this happened because of President Trump's implementation of powerful tariffs to end the era of economic surrender and rebalance America's trading agreements. American workers and companies are the best in the world, and they finally have a president who has their backs, fights for them, and delivers good deals that puts them first. This is just the first of many trade deals to come. Get ready for more historic deals and our country to boom like never before. On that note, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Ambassador Jamieson Greer will meet with the lead representatives on economic matters from the People's Republic of China over the weekend in Switzerland. As President Trump has said, the United States and China have been talking for some time over the course of the administration, and now teams from both countries will meet in person to continue discussions. You can be certain that President Trump and his trade team will ensure we work to achieve the best deal possible for America. In other news, the Trump administration just announced a new incentive for illegal aliens living in the United States to self-deport. Eligible illegal aliens who now use the CBP Home app to self-deport will receive a clear, safe way to leave the United States. Their plane tickets home may be paid for, and they will receive a $1,000 stipend once we have confirmation that they have left our country. This new feature will allow illegal aliens to have a planned departure out of the country and to leave as soon as possible in a dignified way. If illegal aliens make the right decision here and submit their intent to depart through the CBP Home app and pass extensive vetting, they will be temporarily deprioritized for ICE detention and enforcement action before their scheduled departure. And leaving voluntarily in this matter may improve their legal immigration options in the future. This initiative will also save massive amounts of money for American taxpayers. Voluntary departures are much more cost-effective than traditional removals. By deploying the CBP Home app in this new way, President Trump is aiming to reduce the need for costly arrests, detentions, and court proceedings. Currently, the average cost of traditional removal is more than $17,000 per illegal alien. Our projections estimate that the use of the CBP Home app will massively reduce that financial burden by approximately 70%, so taxpayer dollars can be redirected and our brave immigration law enforcement officers can focus on removing the most violent illegal aliens hiding in our communities. Finally, it was announced this morning that First Lady Melania Trump secured a $25 million investment in President Trump's budget to provide housing and support for youth transitioning out of foster care. And in recognition of the 7th anniversary of Mrs. Trump's Be Best initiative, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development allocated funds toward the agency Foster Youth to Independence program. Yesterday, Mrs. Trump hosted a special celebration of military mothers with the president, bringing together 150 military moms from around the country to recognize their service, not just in their home, but for our country. For those of you who were there at the events yesterday like I did, I have no doubt you will join me in recognizing how truly special those moments were. So let's get to questions. Here in our new media seat today is Andrew Egger, the White House correspondent for The Bulwark. The Bulwark is a new media company launched in 2019 with hundreds of thousands of readers on Substack and more than 1 million subscribers on YouTube. Andrew, please kick us off. And thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Caroline. The president posted another ad this week for his Trump meme coin. The group that's running that coin is encouraging people to buy in order to win a dinner this month with the president. Why is the president planning to attend a dinner for the top investors in his coin?
Look, the president is abiding by all conflict of interest laws. The president has been incredibly transparent with his own personal financial obligations throughout the years. The president is a successful businessman, and I think, frankly, it's one of the many reasons that people reelected him back to this office.
There are at least some people who are buying this coin who seem to view it as an opportunity to influence the president's views. There was a logistics company this week that said they would buy $20 million in the coin in order to advocate for free trade between the U.S. and Mexico. If buyers are buying for that reason, are they wasting their money?
Look, I can assure you the president acts with only the interests of the American public in mind, putting our country first and doing what's best for our country, full stop. That's his intention, and that's what he's focused on. Kristen, good to see you here today. Welcome back.
Caroline. Thank you. Glad to be back. So on those China talks, what does President Trump expect to come out of those talks? And is he going to be disappointed if his team can't secure a deal?
Well, look, the president is very confident in his Secretary of Treasury, Scott Bessent, and of course, Ambassador Jamieson Greer, who has played an instrumental role in all of these trade negotiations as well. I think yesterday's success, the announcement of a trade deal with the United Kingdom, is a great first step. Again, many said in this room it couldn't be done. Now we are moving forward with many other countries. We're talking to dozens of our trading partners around the world. But of course, China is a major country, a major player in this space. And the president has said, and he's right, China needs the United States of America. They need our markets. They need our consumer base. And Secretary Bessent knows that he's going to Switzerland this weekend with the full support and confidence and trust of the president here at home.
Thanks very much, Caroline. Two questions. First, can you give us an update on U.S. efforts to mediate or have an impact on the conflict between India and Pakistan?
Sure, I absolutely can. This is something that the Secretary of State and, of course, now our National Security Advisor as well, Marco Rubio, has been very much involved in. The President has expressed he wants to see this de-escalate as quickly as possible. He understands these are two countries that have been at odds with one another for decades, long before President Trump was here in the Oval Office. However, he has good relationships with the leaders of both countries, and the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, I spoke to him just yesterday. He has been in constant communication with the leaders of both countries, trying to bring this conflict to an end.
Just one other question. Yesterday, we saw the news of the new Pope. Before Pope Leo became Pope Leo, there were some critical comments that he made about President Trump and about Vice President Vance on his then X account. Does the White House have any reaction to those comments?
The President made his reaction to Pope Leo's announcement yesterday very clear. He is very proud to have an American Pope. I think it was a surprise to everyone. I saw the news media was surprised to report on that yesterday, but it's a great thing for the United States of America and for the world, and we are praying for him.
Thanks, Caroline. The President has been pretty firm on keeping these 145% tariffs in place on Chinese imports. Today, via Truth Social, he said that he'd be possibly open to lowering those to 80%. Why the change, and how did the President land on 80?
The President still remains with his position that he is not going to unilaterally bring down tariffs on China. We need to see concessions from them as well. And again, that's part of the reason that Secretary Bessent is going to talk to his Chinese counterparts this weekend to start those discussions in person. As for the 80% number, that was a number the President threw out there, and we'll see what happens this weekend. And always in the effort of transparency, I'm sure you'll hear directly from the Treasury Secretary or the President after those negotiations conclude. Jackie.
Thank you, Caroline. Why did the White House announce this deal with the UK before all of the details were finished?
That's not true, actually. I saw the fact sheet. I saw the deal as well before the President brought all of you in the Oval Office in the effort of transparency. You had the President and the Prime Minister on the phone talking to all of you directly about how this was a great deal, a phenomenal deal, and discussions will continue. But as I spoke to our Ambassador Greer yesterday, this is how trade deals work. You set an initial agreement, you set the framework, you set up the deal, and then of course, T's have to be crossed and I's have to be dotted, but this deal is a good deal, and the numbers are determined, and all of the market access that I just discussed will remain.
Does that mean that the 10% baseline is going to still be there at the end when all of the other details are ironed out?
The President is committed to the 10% baseline tariff, not just for the United Kingdom, but for his trade negotiations with all other countries as well.
Permanently, even after the deals are done, like that is going to remain?
The President is determined to continue with that 10% baseline tariff. I just spoke to him about it earlier. Stephen.
Thank you, Caroline. I'd like to ask about New York and about a personnel matter. On New York, the mayor, Eric Adams, is here today. Could you tell us anything more about the visit, who initiated it, what they're talking about? And also, is there any comment from the White House on the air traffic control issues in Newark?
All I will say on Mayor Eric Adams is that he requested a meeting with the President, and the President was willing to take it. If the President wishes to discuss his private meeting afterwards, I will let him do that himself. Yes, I'm glad you asked about the FAA. There was a glitch in the system this morning, especially at Newark Airport. As you all know, I spoke to the Department of Transportation. That glitch was caused by the same telecoms and software issues that were raised last week. Everything went back online after the brief outage, and there was no operational impact. DOT and the FAA are working to address this technical issue tonight to prevent further outages, as well as install new fiber from Newark Airport to Philadelphia. And the goal is to have the totality of this work done by the end of the summer. I want to add that this outage at Newark Airport speaks to why the Secretary of Transportation yesterday made a massive announcement in investing in our aviation safety and our telecom system. There's a 4-part infrastructure plan that was released by the Secretary of Transportation yesterday to improve communication, surveillance, automation, and their facilities. They want to replace the antiquated telecom systems with new fiber, wireless, and satellite technologies, replace more than 600 radars, which have gone way past their life cycle, and address runway safety. They want to build 6 new air traffic control centers for the first time since the 1960s and replace towers as well. They want to implement new modern hardware and software for all traffic facilities to create a common platform system throughout the towers. These are much needed changes. This is a very bold plan by the Department of Transportation. I think it's unfortunate that the previous administration sat on their hands and did nothing, but how grateful we are that we have a Department of Transportation and a secretary and a president who's willing to take bold action and change.
The personnel matter, Caroline, could I ask?
Thanks, Caroline. Just going back to India, Pakistan, can we expect President Trump to get in touch personally with the leaders of those countries to try and de-escalate this situation?
If and when that happens, we will certainly let you know. Natalie.
Thanks, Caroline. Sure. I have a question about the Middle East trip. Will any of the president's family members, like including Don Jr., Eric, or Jared Kushner, be joining him on the trip?
I am not tracking any of the president's family members joining us at this time, but of course, the first family is welcome to come. I hope they would. They're great people, great to be around, but I'm not tracking them on the manifest.
And given that you noted he is a successful businessman, do you know if the president has any plans to meet with any of the folks involved with any of the family businesses over there, or see any of the sites that are going to be
Not to my knowledge, and let me just get to the premise of your question that both of you have raised. I think it's frankly ridiculous that anyone in this room would even suggest that President Trump is doing anything for his own benefit. He left a life of luxury and a life of running a very successful real estate empire for public service, not just once, but twice. And again, the American public reelected him back to this White House because they trust he acts in the best interest of our country and putting the American public first. This is a president who has actually lost money for being president of the United States. I don't remember these same type of questions being asked of my predecessor about a career politician who was clearly profiting off of this office. That is not what President Trump does, and this White House holds ourselves to the highest of ethical standards. Phil.
Thank you. There's this Reuters report that the U.S. is in talks with Israel about an American-led post-war administration in Gaza. Is that accurate? Are these talks ongoing?
We are in constant communication and dialogue with our counterparts and our allies and friends in Israel. Ron Dermer was here at the White House yesterday meeting with members of President Trump's team. As for the situation in Gaza, the president and his entire national security team have made it very clear we want to see the hostages released from Gaza. That is a priority for this administration. As for what that looks like, and even moving beyond that, I'm not going to get into the details of plans that frankly may or may not have even been proposed, but I can emphasize what the president holds closest in his heart right now, and that's the release of all of the hostages in Gaza.
And then there's been some conservative pushback to some of these salt tax, the salt tax cap. For instance, Majority Leader Steve Scalise said that bringing back the state and local tax deduction would essentially mean, quote, 45 states are subsidizing 5 states that have very high taxes imposed by leftist governors. Is he wrong? Is it fair to ask red Indiana to bail out blue New York?
Well, look, this is an ongoing discussion on the Hill. There's a lot of disagreement on Capitol Hill right now about the SALT tax proposal, and we will let them work it out. As for the tax provisions in the reconciliation bill, the priorities of this president, he has made them incredibly clear. No tax on tips for our hardworking service workers, no tax on Social Security for our well-deserving seniors who have worked their whole lives to pay into this system, no tax on overtime for hardworking Americans as well, and there's a plethora of other priorities the president wants to see in this bill. Anyone who opposes this bill will be opposing the largest tax cut in American history. They will be voting to raise taxes by the tune of $4 trillion on the middle class of this country, and we look forward to holding them accountable for that. Everyone on Capitol Hill on both sides of the aisle should be supportive of the president's tax priorities.
Follow up on that?
Go ahead. Sure. Go ahead, and then I'll go to your follow-up.
Thanks, Caroline. So I want to follow up on the Truth Social post. So the president's saying 80% tariffs could come down. Just an announcement would be enough to lower those tariffs. Is that what he's looking for from the Chinese?
That's not what the president said. He said that an 80% number may sound good to him, but again, he's in constant contact with our Secretary of Treasury, who will be leading these negotiations this weekend.
And historically, the Chinese have made the meeting itself a win. What does a win look like out of these meetings for the president this weekend?
A good deal for the American worker and the American people. Go ahead.
Thanks, Caroline. Yeah, back to the reconciliation bill. Can you just clarify the president's position, though, a little bit specifically on the tax issue? Because in his Truth Social post, he said this morning that he would accept even a tiny tax increase for the rich, but then says Republicans probably shouldn't do it, but I'm okay if they do it. So what is it that he wants? Does he want them to increase the tax rates?
The president wants tax cuts, the largest tax cuts in history. He wants to extend his historic tax cuts from 2017, and he wants to see all of the other tax priorities priorities that I just laid out for you included in this bill as well. As for the policy proposal you're talking about, the president has said he himself personally would not mind paying a little bit more to help the poor and the middle class and the working class in this country. I think, frankly, that's a very honorable position. But again, these negotiations are ongoing on Capitol Hill, and the president will weigh in when he feels necessary.
Encourage them to have a higher bracket for top earners.
The president has made his personal position on this matter clear. Michael. The president's in constant communication with leaders on the Hill.
Ahead of the president's trip to the Middle East, he's mentioned he wants to rename the Persian Gulf the Gulf of Arabia. Iran is now saying that doing so will bring the wrath of all Iranians. Can you talk about the support that the Gulf of Arabia has in the region and why this is important to the president?
Well, first of all, the president has said he hasn't made a determination yet. That was in the news that you guys all asked him about it, and he said he wasn't quite sure. So he hasn't made a definitive decision on that yet.
And secondly, Caroline, the president has shown support for South African refugees that are coming to the United States next week. Can you talk about what these refugees are fleeing and why this is a priority for the administration?
Well, the president has actually signed an executive order on that matter. My office can get it back to you, Michael. But this group in South Africa has faced racial persecution. In fact, the government there has vowed to take away their farmland that they own. And so the president has talked significantly about this. As for further details on refugee claims and asylum claims, I would defer you to the State Department.
Can I follow up on that?
Go ahead. No, in front of you.
Thanks, sorry.
Sure.
Thank you, Caroline. Does the administration have any response to the news today that a federal judge has ordered the immediate release of Ramesa Ozturk from detention, and particularly his comments that the government submitted no evidence other than an op-ed that Ozturk wrote last year?
I will have to check in with the Department of Homeland Security on that particular case, but I think our overall feeling, we've made quite clear that lower level judges should not be dictating the foreign policy of the United States, and we absolutely believe that the president and the Department of Homeland Security are well within their legal rights to deport illegal immigrants. As for visa revocations, the Secretary of State has the right to do that as well. It is a privilege, not a right, to come to this country on a visa. But I'll check in on the specific case. My office will get you details. Sure.
Caroline, yesterday the administration appears to have started dismantling the Consumer Product Safety Commission. This is the federal agency, an independent one that does recalls and is responsible for product safety. Does the administration not believe that it's important, to keep toys and cribs? I mean, you're a young mom, off of the product of the market.
It's a federal agency within which branch? It's the executive branch. Who's the head of the executive branch? The President of the United States.
Created by Congress.
He has the right to fire people within the executive branch. It's a pretty simple answer. Francesca.
Thanks. One foreign policy one and then a domestic policy thing, if I could. As far as the president's trip goes next week, is he planning to meet with the FIFA president in either Saudi Arabia or Qatar? And if so, could you give us some more details about that?
The president has quite a few meetings with many people when he is there. We can certainly check at the itinerary and let you know if the FIFA president will be there next week. Frankly, I'm not quite sure, but we can certainly get you an answer. As you know, the president attended a FIFA task force meeting at the White House this week.
And on the domestic front, could you explain why the FEMA administrator was removed from his position this week?
Look, this is a personnel matter in regards to the Department of Homeland Security, but my understanding is that this individual testified saying something that was contrary to what the president believes and the goals of this administration in regards to FEMA policy. And so, of course, we want to make sure that people in every position are advancing the administration's goals. But as for specifics, I defer you to the Department of Homeland Security. We leave it up to our great cabinet secretaries when it comes to personnel matters. Sure, in the back.
Thank you. Aid hasn't gone into Gaza in 10 weeks. Israel says that this is a policy to pressure Hamas in the negotiations, in the ceasefire negotiations. Is this a policy that this administration supports?
The president answered this week. He said that he wants to ensure that aid can get into Gaza, but we have to do it in a responsible way to ensure it doesn't end up in the hands of terrorists. So this is something the administration is actively working on, and when we have a policy to announce on this definitively, we can certainly let you know.
Can you talk about this effort for the U.S. to take over the distribution of aid in Gaza, to exclude Israel? But also international organizations said this effort militarizes aid.
I would reject that characterization by whatever groups you are citing. Kelly.
Caroline, thank you. I want to get back to the First Lady Melania Trump dealing with foster children. That's an important component in American life to see what happens to the future of our children, particularly in foster care. Can you explain the significance of this development between the First Lady and the Housing and Urban Development?
Yes, absolutely. It's millions of dollars that will go into a program that helps these children transition out of foster care to have productive and positive lives. And I'd like to share a personal story since you asked if I may. I hope the First Lady won't mind. I was at an event in Florida last year, and I was approached by a gentleman who was a foster dad, and he had taken in, I think it was 6 or 7 foster children. And he spoke to me. He had recognized me in my work for President Trump's campaign at the time. And the little boy who was with him talked about the personal relationship that he had with First Lady Melania Trump. And the conversation she had had with him and how she really encouraged him to be the best that he could be during her first term here at the White House, and how even after she and President Trump left the White House, she kept in very close touch with this young foster child. It was a touching moment that I will never forget, and it speaks to the heart of this First Lady and the great work that she is doing for foster children. And this is certainly a very big announcement that I know our Secretary of Housing and Urban Development is in particular very excited about, and we can certainly get you all the details on that program. John.
Thanks a lot, Caroline. I want to ask you about the trade deal that the president announced yesterday with the UK as it relates to the auto sector.
Sure.
The trade group that represents the big three here in the U.S. believes that it may put the big three automakers at a competitive disadvantage. What the trade group says is that it will now be cheaper to import a UK vehicle with very little American content than a USMCA compliant vehicle imported from Mexico or Canada with just 50% American content. What's your response to that criticism coming from this trade group?
Well, first of all, let's be clear about what the deal does. It sets a 10% rate on auto imports for the first 100 cars that are imported into the United States. 100,000 cars, thank you. That would be very few cars. 100,000 cars imported from the United Kingdom. After 100,000 vehicles, it goes back up to a 25% tariff. And as for our U.S. auto manufacturers, our auto industry, the president wants to put them on the best pedestal to compete. And by the way, if they produce vehicles right here in the United States of America, they will face no tariff at all. I would argue of any industry, the president has spent more time talking to and listening to the concerns of our auto industry here at home. He hears them, he believes in them, he wants to see them produce their vehicles here in the United States of America. This is a good deal for them too.
Is this a model for European and Asian vehicles as well, what we see coming out of the UK trade deal with the US?
Look, all of these deals are going to be tailor-made. The president has said that from the beginning. It's very apropos that the first trade deal was announced between the United States and the United Kingdom, one of our oldest and greatest allies, but each country has unique concerns and challenges in terms of American industry. We need to open up markets in every single country, and obviously the needs are unique, so our trade team is looking at each country and the advantages that we can pursue for American industries and American workers. Sure.
Happy early Mother's Day. Oh, thank you. The president said yesterday that he would be speaking with Zelensky shortly. Did that call happen yesterday, or do we expect that to happen in the near term?
The call happened yesterday. President Zelensky called the president to tell him that the critical minerals deal had passed the parliament in Ukraine. I talked to the president about that call. He said it was very good and productive, and of course the critical minerals deal is great for Ukraine, but also of course for the United States of America and our taxpayers here. It was a good call, and they also spoke about, of course, this ceasefire that the president proposed, the 30-day ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine, which we know Europe is on board with, and we hope both countries will agree to.
So next week, do we expect President Putin, is there any chance that he could meet with Trump while he's in the region?
The president answered this yesterday. Not going to happen.
Question on ceasefire. Has he got any reaction from Zelensky or Putin on the proposal for ceasefire? Is he satisfied by the reaction to that proposal?
Not to my knowledge, but certainly if there is reaction and updates, I'm sure you'll hear directly from the president.
Question, the president fired the Librarian of Congress. Why did he choose to do that?
We felt she did not fit the needs of the American people. There were quite concerning things that she had done at the Library of Congress in the pursuit of DEI and putting inappropriate books in the library for children, and we don't believe that she was serving the interests of the American taxpayer well, so she has been removed from her position, and the president is well within his rights to do that. John.
Thank you, Caroline. Happy Mother's Day as well.
Thank you.
President Trump ran on delivering the biggest tax cut in history, got over 70 million votes. Right now, you got a handful of obstructionists in the Republican conference that are saying they're not going to go along with his tax cut package. You just said those that don't will be held accountable. What is your description of being held accountable?
Well, look, I think they'll be held accountable by the voters in their respective districts if they choose to vote for a tax hike to the tune of $4 trillion, which would raise taxes to thousands of dollars per household in this country. The president has great political instincts. That's why he's back in the Oval Office, and Capitol Hill should follow his lead. As for the president, speaking of him, he will be signing executive orders later this afternoon. We are happy to provide more information on those executive orders if you wish. Thank you for the Mother's Day wishes, and happy Mother's Day to all of the moms in the room. And don't forget to call your mom this Sunday. We'll see you guys later. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, Caroline.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt there with a message for mothers ahead of Mother's Day. She covered a range of updates, touting the recent U.S.-UK trade deal, saying it's the first of many. She mentioned upcoming trade talks between the U.S. and China on trade, saying the president is committed to a 10% baseline tariff for all countries. On immigration, Leavitt outlined the administration's latest incentives for illegal immigrants, including monetary and logistical support to get out of the country. Also, First Lady Melania Trump securing funds to support foster care children transition out of the system. And answering questions from reporters, Leavitt said the administration has been in communication with the leaders of India and Pakistan, currently at war, to try to de-escalate that war. And the press secretary said the president is praying for the new pope, even in the face of some previous criticism from the pontiff. Trump spoke with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, also, who said the new critical minerals deal had passed the parliament there. So a few major updates there, and stay tuned. We'll have more for you coming up.
Stay tuned to get a free month of home warranty protection. Tired of searching for contractors when your home appliances and systems break down, only to leave you stuck with a huge repair bill and shoddy repairs? Plumbing, heating, air conditioning, and appliance breakdowns could cost thousands.
Hi, I'm Ty Pennington, here for Choice Home Warranty. They protect my home from expensive repairs, and they could do the same for you. No matter if it's your refrigerator, plumbing, or more than 20 other home systems and appliances, Choice Home Warranty has saved millions of homeowners a whole lot of money. For a low monthly fee, you get their nationwide network of trusted local technicians with plans that cover repairs and replacements done quickly and the right way.
I would recommend anyone who is listening to this to call Choice Home Warranty up. It eliminates anxiety, frustration, and it saves you money.
Don't let an appliance or home system break the bank, leaving you stressed. Call Choice Home Warranty before that happens and get your first month free. Plus, call in the next 5 minutes and we'll give you free limited roof leak coverage. That's a $70 value, free. Just call now.
No more headaches searching for technicians. No more budget-breaking chaos. Just a peace of mind of having Choice Home Warranty at your service. I trust Choice Home Warranty with my home, and you should too.
Year after year, Choice Home Warranty is recognized as the nation's top home warranty and has thousands of 5-star reviews from real homeowners. Experience real budget protection and call Choice Home Warranty now.
Stop throwing money down the toilet chasing contractors. Call Choice Home Warranty now and save big with their special offer of your first month free and free limited roof coverage. Don't wait another minute. Call now.
Call Choice Home Warranty for your free personalized quote and to get your first month free. Call in the next 5 minutes, and as our special offer, you'll receive free limited roof coverage. That's over $100 in savings. This offer won't last long. Call now to lock in your rate and save big. Call 800-216-9114, 800-216-9114.
I debate all day
what I do. But there are some things that are undebatable, like your mental health, my own mental health. I was in a dark place when my brother passed away in a car accident. I've never been more devastated than the day I lost my mom. I was depressed, miserable, in ways I never imagined. I reached out, and my sisters came, my pastor, my therapist. They helped me get through it. I found that the more I spoke up, the healthier my mind became. The chaos that was in me began to subside. I was more focused, clear. When you love your mind, you can go so much further. That's not up for debate. Find mental health resources at loveyourmindtoday.org.
An update on the Gaza humanitarian crisis. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee said today that neither Israel nor Hamas will be involved in aid distribution.
I want to say the Israelis are going to be involved in providing necessary military security because it is a war zone. But they will not be involved in the distribution of the food or even in the bringing of the food into Gaza. Their role will remain on the perimeter as is necessary to make sure that those who are bringing the food in and who are distributing the food are kept safe and out of harm's way in the midst of a war zone.
Israel cut most aid supplies into Gaza after the Hamas terror attacks in 2023 that began the war. It let aid in during a ceasefire that began in January this year, but cut off supplies again when it resumed its offensive against the terrorist group in March. Israel has accused agencies, including the United Nations, of allowing large amounts of aid to fall into the hands of Hamas. Mediation efforts by the United States, Qatar, and Egypt have not been successful in implementing another phase of the ceasefire. Big tax and spending questions are at the forefront of Republicans' new budget goals. President Trump wants to prevent cutting social safety net programs like Medicaid and is reportedly pushing for a higher millionaire tax to get it done. NTD's Melina Weisskopf reports.
President Trump aims to make the biggest tax cut for middle and working class Americans and eliminate taxes on tips, overtime, and senior Social Security. Now he's asking Congress to look at raising rates on wealthier Americans. Under consideration is a proposal to raise the individual tax rate on people earning over $2 million per year from 37% to 39%. A White House source told the Epoch Times' Amel Akin that the plan is to help Trump meet his goal to lower taxes on the working class, at the same time protecting Medicaid funds. But the road ahead is sticky, as some Republicans in Congress are opposed to such an increase.
I'd like to not see rates raised on anybody at this point. This is very difficult to be able to do right now across the economy in that sense. So I'd like to be able to maintain rates where they are, but the vast majority have got to be able to get engaged and say, how do we actually resolve this?
House Speaker Mike Johnson previously said he's not a fan of it, but to stay tuned, highlighting the fluidity of the discussions underway. The news comes as lawmakers are having trouble navigating a plan to cut the federal budget and cut taxes without causing a big blow to social safety net programs. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Trump today cautioned fellow Republicans in Congress of the political consequences if they raise taxes on the wealthiest Americans. He wrote on Truth Social that Republicans should probably not do it, but added that he would be okay if they do. The Trump administration has imposed sanctions on a third Chinese oil refinery and 3 port operators for purchasing Iranian oil. The move was part of the maximum pressure strategy by the Trump administration to cut off Iran's oil income. It aims to push Tehran to limiting its nuclear program and to end its support for terrorist groups in the Middle East. The Treasury Department said the sanctioned Chinese companies had purchased or facilitated the delivery of hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Iranian oil. This as the U.S. and Iran are expected to head into a 4th round of nuclear talks. Top AI executives say the U.S. is leading the global AI race, but warn that lead could slip away without support from Washington. This was during a Senate Commerce Committee hearing yesterday. Here's Senator Ted Cruz.
As a matter of economic security, as a matter of national security, America has to beat China in the AI race. China has made AI central to its national strategy, and China aims to lead the world in AI by 2030.
The number one factor that will define whether the United States or China wins this race is whose technology is most broadly adopted in the rest of the world. This is a global market, and it will be defined as technology markets typically are by network effects. 18% of the people in the world live in China, 4% live in the United States, 78% live somewhere else. The lesson from Huawei and 5G is whoever gets there first will be difficult to supplant.
The Senate Commerce Committee is looking to cut regulatory barriers to meet the challenges posed by Chinese AI development. The U.S. tech industry plans to lobby the Trump administration for more favorable policies, like easing export restrictions on AI chips. Executives say promoting worldwide use of U.S. AI reflects democratic values and is a matter of national interest. Chinese company Huawei also makes an advanced AI chip and has faced U.S. restrictions over concerns its equipment could be used to spy on users. The Trump administration plans to change a set of AI chips export curbs unveiled during the final days of the Biden administration. They were set to take effect on May 15th. Lawmakers call for a Chinese robotics company to be blacklisted, citing national security concerns. Democrats and Republicans sent a letter to Pentagon officials this week asking them to designate the company Unitree as a Chinese military company. Unitree makes humanoid robots and robot dogs. Some of its products are currently used in American law enforcement and army operations, but the gear can be used for surveillance. The most concerning, lawmakers say, is its remote digital access. Each robot is connected through the cloud with data going back to the Chinese regime. Chairman of a select committee on the Chinese Communist Party said, quote, every single member of the committee, Democrats and Republicans, signed this letter because we all see the risk Beijing is quietly embedding itself in our critical systems. We must act now, he said, to ban and blacklist Unitree before it's too late. For round-the-clock original news coverage, watch us live at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. And be sure to stick around for NTD Newsroom at 2 p.m. Eastern. We'll cover more stories from the U.S. and around the world right here after this break.
I'm Jonathan Lawson. If you're 50 to 85...